I was barefoot in the yard, chasing a screaming toddler with one sock in her mouth, when I realized I hadn't eaten in 24 hours. The casserole I had made for my quiet dinner was still untouched on the kitchen counter, cold, like the silence from my son's phone. 3 days ago, my daughter-in-law Cheryl dumped 4 kids on my porch with nothing but a duffel bag of goldfish crackers and said, "You're retired. You've got time." Then she sped off to the Caribbean. No phone call, no discussion, just 4 wild, confused children and a woman who'd just turned 64, left holding the bag. I thought retirement would mean quiet mornings and crossword puzzles. But now, I was scrubbing permanent marker off the walls and trying to remember how to stop a fever in a 4-year-old. I had to ask myself, how did I let it get this far? And what was I going to do about it? 3 days earlier, I had been pruning my roses and humming Patsy Cline when Cheryl's rented minivan pulled up like a storm cloud. I thought she came to drop off a birthday card for me. Instead, she opened the trunk and 4 kids spilled out, crying, whining, and already sticky with candy. Before I could say a word, she hugged me with one arm and muttered something about a last-minute cruise deal, then bolted back into the car like a fugitive. I stood frozen on my porch, mouth open, as her tires kicked up gravel and vanished down the road. At first, I told myself I could manage. I'd raised 2 boys, after all. But those memories were decades old. My knees weren't what they used to be, and neither was my patience. That night, one of the twins wet the couch, another screamed for his iPad until 2 in the morning. And I ended up rocking the youngest to sleep with a lukewarm bottle of milk and an aching back. By day 2, I was rationing cereal and Googling how to keep toddlers busy without losing your mind. I tried calling my son Steven. Voicemail. Texted. No answer. I checked Cheryl's social media. There she was in a floppy sun hat, sipping something pink with a caption that read, "Finally free." I felt like I'd been slapped. Then the fever hit. The littlest boy, barely 3, curled up on the bathroom rug, burning up and sobbing. I gave him the last of the children's Tylenol I had left from God knows when and sat beside him on the cold tile, feeling more alone than I had in years. By the 3rd night, I was done. Not just tired, drained. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, this haggard woman with bags under her eyes and crusted oatmeal on her sleeve, and thought, is this what love is supposed to look like? The next morning, I called my neighbor Olivia. "Ina favor, y whisperat. Can you sit with the kids for an hour?" She didn't ask questions. She just said yes. I left a note on the fridge. Then I got in my car, started the engine, and drove toward the city with one thing echoing in my mind. I'm not their solution. I'm not disposable. And today, I'm taking my life back. I had just poured myself a cup of chamomile tea and stepped onto the porch when I saw the car pull into my gravel driveway. At first, I thought it was a neighbor, maybe someone lost. But when the door opened and I saw Cheryl step out with a suitcase in one hand and a baby carrier in the other, my stomach dropped. I hadn't seen her in months, not since the argument over Thanksgiving dinner. She didn't even say hello, just looked me dead in the eye and said, "I need to stay here for a while." We had a fight. He told me to leave. No warning.
No epalegi.
Just this.
I'm 68.
I've raised 2 children, buried one husband, and finally learned how to sleep through the night without worrying about someone else's mess. My days were filled with gardening, good books, and coffee with my friends at the church cafe. I had found peace in the silence. But all of that ended the moment Cheryl crossed my threshold. She brought her 2 young kids, both under the age of 5, and enough emotional baggage to sink a ship. I didn't know what had gone wrong with her and my son, but I could see it in her eyes. Something had snapped. Still, there was no conversation. No plan. Just the expectation that I would make room. That I would fix it. That, once again, I would become the glue that held someone else's crumbling life together. The first night, the baby cried until nearly dawn. The toddler wet the guest bed. Cheryl stayed in her room, locked away, scrolling through her phone or sobbing quietly behind the door. I walked the floors, cleaned the sheets, warmed bottles, and told myself it was temporary. That she just needed a day or 2 to catch her breath. But by day 5, I realized something. Cheryl wasn't trying to rebuild. She was hiding from the world, from responsibility, from her own choices. I tried talking to her, gently at first. Honey, we need to figure out what's next. She shrugged. I don't know. I offered to help her look for a job, an apartment, even a counselor. She rolled her eyes. Why can't I just stay here? And there it was, the entitlement. The assumption that my quiet life was just an open door for her chaos. That my golden years were up for grabs. Then came the breaking point. I came home from the grocery store, bags in both hands, and found the kids drawing on my living room walls in permanent marker while Cheryl sat on the couch, watching TV with her earbuds in. She didn't even look up. I set the bags down, my hands trembling. Cheryl, I said quietly, we need to talk. Now. I poured out everything I'd been holding in. The exhaustion. The disrespect. The way she'd turned my home into a shelter, without asking. I told her I loved her, but I would no longer be used. That my home was not a free pass from adulthood. And when she got angry, accusing me of turning my back on family, I simply said, no, Cheryl. I'm choosing myself this time. She left the next morning. No hug. No goodbye. Just a slammed door and a cloud of resentment. And you know what? It hurt. But it also healed something in me. For once, I didn't put myself last. For once, I didn't clean up someone else's storm. Because at this age, I've earned the right to say, enough. They said it would only be for the weekend, just 48 hours. That's what my son and daughter-in-law promised when they dropped off their kids at my front door. They were headed to a wellness retreat, whatever that means these days, and claimed it was important for their marriage. You'll be fine, Mom, they said with those hurried smiles, already backing out of my driveway before I could even say, wait. But what was supposed to be 2 days turned into 5, then 8. And somewhere around day 10, I realized they weren't coming back anytime soon, and I had no idea when or if they would. I'm 72. I've had both hips replaced, survived breast cancer, and buried people I loved. I've learned to keep going, no matter what. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for taking care of 3 grandchildren under the age of 10, completely on my own. I had frozen dinners in the fridge, yarn on the coffee table, and a stack of mystery novels I was finally planning to read. Instead, I found myself elbow-deep in peanut butter sandwiches, laundry that never ended, and a 4-year-old who thought the living room was a trampoline. The nights were the hardest. The baby cried on and off from teething, the middle child had night terrors, and the oldest wet the bed twice in the same night. I averaged 3 hours of sleep, tops. During the day, they clung to me like frightened ducklings, confused, unsettled, asking why Mommy and Daddy hadn't called. I didn't have the answers. I texted. I called.
No replies.
The last message I got said, just a few more days, promise. But it had already been over a week.
I didn't want to admit how bad it was.
Not even to myself. But one morning, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror, and I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Hair a mess, eyes bloodshot. Hands shaking as I tried to open the pill bottle for my arthritis meds. My body ached from lifting the baby, chasing the others, and bending over to pick up endless toys and crumbs. I had always prided myself on being strong, but this was breaking me. The final straw came when the school called. The oldest had told his teacher he didn't know when he'd see his parents again. A social worker followed up the next day. I stood there, listening to her questions, my heart pounding. How did I end up in this position, responsible for 3 little lives, without even the basic decency of a real conversation or consent? That night, I made a decision. I called my daughter, the one who always told me I needed to stop being everyone's safety net. Come stay with the kids, I said. I need to go find your brother. And I meant it. I wasn't going to sit and suffer in silence anymore. I deserved answers and respect. The next morning, I drove 4 hours to the retreat center listed on their last text. What I found shocked me. They weren't working on their marriage. They were partying, carefree. Not a single worry etched into their faces. When my son saw me standing there, holding a photo of his children. He turned pale. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm, steady. "And this time, you're going to listen. Because I may be older, but I am not invisible. And I won't be taken for granted, not by anyone." The moment she moved in, everything changed. My son said it would only be for a little while, just until things settled down between him and his new wife. But from the second she stepped through my front door, I stopped feeling like the mother of the house and started feeling like an unwelcome guest in my own home. It's strange how quickly peace can disappear. One day, you're enjoying your morning coffee in the kitchen you designed. The next you're being told where to put your own dishes. I'm 69 years old. I've been widowed for 7. I worked 34 years as a school secretary, raised 3 kids mostly on my own, and thought I'd earned a little dignity by now. But dignity has no place when you're being silently pushed out by the woman your son married just a year ago. It started with small things. She rearranged the living room, moved my family photos into a drawer, and told me the decor was a bit dated. Then she took over the kitchen, throwing out my cast iron skillet and replacing it with some sleek, expensive set she saw on a cooking show. I bit my tongue. After all, I told myself, she's young. She'll adjust. But then she started locking the door to the laundry room and claiming I got the loads mixed up. As if I hadn't done laundry since before she was born. Still, the worst part wasn't the rearranged house or the passive-aggressive notes on the fridge. It was the silence. My son, my sweet boy who used to call me every Sunday and ask for my meatloaf recipe, just stood by and watched it happen. Or maybe worse, he let it happen. I tried to talk to him one night after dinner, when she'd gone upstairs. I told him I felt pushed out, that I wasn't trying to be in the way. I just wanted to feel like I belonged in the home I helped pay for. He nodded but didn't say much. "She's trying her best," he mumbled. "It's just hard for her to feel like this is her space too." That hit me like a slap. Her space? Her space? I've lived in this house for 27 years. I nursed my husband through his final days in the bedroom she turned into her yoga studio. I planted the roses in the front yard with my bare hands. And now I was supposed to act like I was lucky to still have a corner to sit in? One morning, I came downstairs and found my coffee mug, my favorite one with the sunflower print, sitting in the trash.
Broken.
When I asked what happened, she just shrugged. It slipped. No apology. No offer to replace it. Just gone. Like everything else. That night, I packed a small bag. Just a weekend away, I told myself. I needed air. I called my sister in Maine and asked if she still had space in her guest room. "Always," she said. "Come as long as you need." As I stood at the door, my son asked, "Where are you going?" And I finally told the truth. Somewhere I feel like I matter. Because I raised my children with love. Not so I could one day be erased in silence. I was sitting in the den, watching the evening news with my slippers on and my hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea when the front door opened and changed everything. I thought it was my husband returning from the store. But instead, in walked his daughter, my stepdaughter, Rachel, dragging a rolling suitcase behind her and wearing that same defiant look I'd come to dread. She didn't knock, didn't call ahead, didn't even say hello, just tossed her bag near the staircase and muttered, "Dad said I could stay for a while." I was 67 then, freshly retired, just beginning to enjoy the quiet rhythm of life after years of raising kids and clocking in at the elementary school library. My husband and I had only been married 5 years, both of us widowed, both ready for a new chapter filled with calm companionship and shared routines. What I didn't expect was to share my home with a grown woman who looked at me like I was the help. At first, I bit my tongue. Rachel had always been a little lost, job hopping, relationship troubles, some talk of financial setbacks. I figured she just needed a safe place to land. But days turned into weeks, and she made no effort to find a job, help with groceries, or even acknowledge me beyond the occasional eye roll. She took over the guest room and then the upstairs bathroom. She blasted music at night and slept past noon. My husband brushed it off. "She's just adjusting." But I was the one losing sleep. Then came the real insult. One evening, As I was cleaning up after dinner, I overheard her on the phone in the hallway whispering to someone, "This house would be perfect if she weren't here all the time."
She.
As if I were a stranger squatting in her space. That night, I waited until she went out and sat across from my husband in the living room. "I need to ask you something," I said. "When you said we'd grow old together, did you mean me, you and her?" He sighed, looked down at his hands. And then he said the one thing I never thought I'd hear from the man who once told me I made his world feel whole. "She's just going through a rough patch. Can't you be a little more patient?" My heart cracked right then. I'd spent my whole life being patient. Patient as a young mother when money was tight. Patient as a widow learning to smile again. Patient in this new marriage. Adjusting to someone else's traditions and rhythms. But now, in my own home, I was expected to shrink myself again? To make room for someone who didn't even respect me? The next morning, I made a decision. I packed a small overnight bag and left a note on the kitchen table. I wasn't running away. I was reclaiming my space, my peace. I went to stay with my sister for a few days. Just enough time for the silence in the house to speak louder than any words I could have said. When I returned, things had changed. My husband met me at the door. His eyes were tired, softer. Rachel had left, off to stay with a friend. He didn't say much, but he didn't have to. The coffee pot was warm. My favorite blanket was folded on the couch. My sunflower mug sat waiting on the kitchen counter. Sometimes love means drawing the line, not just holding it. And that's how I learned peace isn't something we stumble upon. It's something we protect, no matter who threatens it. I hadn't seen her in 15 years, not since the day my son's wedding photos came back without a single picture of me in them. Not one. No mother-son dance, no walking him down the aisle, not even a smile in the background. That was the day I realized his new wife, Amanda, didn't just want my son. She wanted him without me. And he let her. So when I opened my front door that Tuesday morning and saw her standing there, holding a casserole and wearing that same sugary smile I remembered all too well, I could barely speak. "Hi, Maureen," she said like we were old friends. I thought I'd stop by. No call. No warning. Just a surprise visit after over a decade of silence. I'm 71 now. I live alone in the house my late husband and I built with our bare hands back in '83. Every room holds a memory, some sweet, some bitter. I'd long made peace with the fact that my son had chosen distance. It wasn't easy, but I'd learned to let go of what wouldn't love me back. Then Amanda showed up and cracked it all open again. She stepped inside like nothing had ever happened, chatting about her new job, the kids' soccer games, and how she and my son had just moved back into town. I stood there, barely listening, every word thick with unspoken history. After a moment, she glanced around and said, "This place hasn't changed much." I smiled politely, though I wanted to say, "No, but I have." Then came the kicker. "We've been thinking," she said, taking a seat like she owned the place, "maybe the boys could start coming by after school. Just a couple days a week. They've never really known this side of the family. It might be good for them." I stared at her. "This side of the family? You mean the side you cut out like we were clutter?" I took a deep breath and asked, "Why now?" She looked surprised by the question. "Well, things are calmer now. And they're older. It just felt like the right time." But I knew better. My son didn't have the nerve to face me himself, so he'd sent his wife to bridge a gap she'd helped dig. And now, after years of silence, she wanted me to step back into the role of grandma like I hadn't been kept out of birthday parties and family photos. I wanted to scream, cry, slam the door, all of it at once. But I didn't. Instead, I walked into the kitchen and returned with a note I'd written years ago, folded and sealed. I handed it to her. She blinked. "What's this?" It's everything I would have said if anyone had ever asked how I felt. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I said calmly, "But if I'm good enough to be part of their lives now, I deserve to be treated with respect. I won't be someone's convenience. And I won't be forgotten again." Amanda stood up slowly. I didn't know you felt this way." "No," I said. You didn't care to know. She left, casserole untouched.
And me?
I sat by the window, hands trembling, heart heavy, but strangely at peace. Because for the first time in a long time, I had finally spoken my truth. The first time I noticed something was off, it was my mail. Just a missing envelope here or there, an electric bill that arrived late, a birthday card from my niece that never showed up. I chalked it up to the post office being slow. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Then came the bank mix-up. A check I'd written to the church bounced. I hadn't bounced a check in 40 years. I went down to the branch, asked the manager to print my recent activity, and stared at the transactions. A boutique children's clothing store, an online baby registry, and a high-end stroller shop. I don't have babies in my life anymore, just arthritis, a faithful tabby cat, and my quiet little garden. None of this made sense.
I'm 74.
I worked in accounts payable for nearly 3 decades. I know how to read a statement, and I knew one thing for sure. Someone was using my money. But who? I didn't have to wonder long. Later that evening, as I was chopping vegetables for dinner, my granddaughter's mother, my former daughter-in-law, stopped by. She hadn't visited in months, not since the divorce. She walked in smiling, her toddler on one hip, a brand-new designer diaper bag slung over the other. I hope you don't mind, she chirped. I used her card to buy a few things for the baby. Just temporary, until things settle. I stood frozen, knife in hand. You what? Oh, come on, Grandma, she laughed, calling me the name only my granddaughter was allowed to use. You weren't using it, and I know you want to help. You always do. It was true. Once I had helped. When she and my son were struggling, I'd paid their rent, bought groceries, even helped with the down payment on their first car. But that was before the divorce. Before she ghosted me, moved 3 states away, and left me out of every milestone in my granddaughter's life. Now she was back, smiling in my kitchen, helping herself to my money, like nothing had ever happened. I tried to stay calm. You had no right. She shrugged, bouncing the baby. You gave me the pin once, remember? That's almost the same.
No.
It wasn't. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the statements, my hand resting on the still warm cup of chamomile tea. My life had become too quiet, too trusting. Somewhere along the way, I stopped guarding my boundaries, and someone walked right through them. But not anymore. The next morning, I closed the card, filed a fraud claim, and had the bank flag any transactions connected to her name. I also called a lawyer, one of those free consultations you get from the senior center, and asked about legal protections for financial abuse. Because that's what this was. My son called later, angry. Mom, she said you embarrassed her. I replied, and she stole from me. Are you embarrassed about that? He didn't say much after that. I haven't seen her since. And while I miss my granddaughter more than words can express, I've learned the hard way that love without respect is just another form of control. Now, my finances are in a trust. My passwords are changed. And the only thing I give freely these days is my time, to people who have earned it. Because sometimes, protecting your peace means standing up, even when it's your own family on the other side of the line.